run the country, or what book I could write if they didn't. Moscow was the place to be, and it just handed me a reason to be there. Sure, the previous American to move to Moscow to edit a magazine, Forbes' Paul Klebnikov, was shot dead there in 2004. Best if that didn't come up in the conversation. But in post-Soviet Russia's wildly sped-up timeline, 2004 was already the distant past. That, in fact, was the most exhilarating thing about Moscow. It seemed to always barrel ahead, making up for lost time by repackaging itself half-blindly after whatever coolness it espied in other cities. It wanted to be London, Paris, and Rome at the same time, but above anything, it wanted to be New York. Boy, did Moscow in 2011 ever want to be New York. And for a New Yorker like me, this made it into a veritable playground of wish fulfillment. The starving, hysterical, naked 1990s, when a pimply student's flash of the U.S. passport at a club's face control instantly gathered a harem, were gone, and certainly for the best. But American work experience still bestowed upon the bearer a kind of magic authority. To anyone whose ambition outpaced their patience, Russia was thus a space-time shortcut, a wormhole to success. Wildcat startups found funding. Third-rate musicians became adored household names. Things got done. Badly, more often than not, but done. In return, as wormholes are theorized to do, it changed you on the atomic level. The you emerging on the other side might just be a little different. I had never lived in Russia proper. My family came to the United States from Riga, Latvia, a Baltic republic affixed to the westernmost edge of the USSR in 1940 as part of the Hitler-Stalin Pact. Thanks to its tiny size and perhaps to a similarly sounding Latveria in the Marvel Comics universe, Latvia is a kind of go-to place for sitcom jokes when one needs to quickly connote Eastern European obscurity. In reality, Riga is rather more Germanic than Slavic, a city in prim boulevards and frothy Jugendstil architecture, presided over by a trio of rooster-topped Gothic spires. Throughout the rest of the Soviet era, it managed to preserve a self-image as an occupied entity. Provincial tourists were sometimes unsure if their rubles would be good here. My grandparents settled in Riga as school teachers after the war, which would technically make them part of the occupation. By the time my mother was born, however, Latvian Russians had already developed a kind of in-between identity. When the USSR broke apart, remarkably few of them would take Russia up on its limited-time offer of citizenship. But then there was the matter of our Jewishness, which the Soviets treated as a strictly ethnic affiliation. Being Jewish meant zip in the way of religion. It meant a funny last name, Zilberman, check, a funnier nose and or hair, check and check, and the stigma of rootless cosmopolitanism, a sticky Stalin-era formulation guaranteeing that no Jew would ever be considered fully Russian. For a college admissions board, an employer's HR department, or even a Communist Party membership committee, the word Yevrey on the notorious ethnicity line of the internal passport might as well read flight risk. The essence of state anti-Semitism is to accuse Jews of wanting to leave until they want to leave. The obverse of that label was our fabled desirability as marriage material for those dreaming of immigration. A Jew is not an ethnicity, a popular joke went, but a means of transport. My childhood thus may not have been a typical Russian one, but it was certainly Soviet enough. Most of it took place in the same dreary communal apartment at 6 Karl Marx Street, where my mother had lived since she was a kid, watching the neighbor's boy go from a listless fifth grader to a frequently jailed alcoholic, whose preferred mode of operation after a day of drinking was to launch tentative axe attacks on his own father. His prone bulk, still and huge like a felled tree, sprawled along the hallway next to shelved skis and shrouded bikes, forms one of my earliest visual memories. Another neighbor, an elderly madman, had long ago convinced himself that the other denizens of the apartment were out to poison him. So he would hover in the communal kitchen waiting for other cooks to leave, then thrust his hands into their boiling soups, fish out piping hot gobs of meat, devour them bent over the pot, the logic being that the neighbors wouldn't poison their own food, and toss the bones back in. My mother and grandmother would find their cooking violated so many times that they started putting out decoy soups. Here's where I wish I could write that I found escape, salvation, and a sense of belonging in the great works of Russian literature, but that would be a complete lie. In truth, the Soviet schools force-fed kids the classics far